Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Pasricha. It is Wednesday, October 1st. We have got a great show planned for you today. We are recapping our AI Agenda Live conference from yesterday with all of the highlights for you. We have also got the CEO of ClickUp coming on to get his view on the corporate data wars, and we are taking stock of the current deal-making environment with the Future Room Group. We also have a ton of news to get to. We've got a big TikTok story that we are going to break down, but I want to start with the news from Microsoft today. Microsoft announced this morning that CEO Satya Nadella will offload some of his duties to the company's chief commercial officer, Judson Althoff. Althoff will become the CEO of Microsoft's commercial business, and Nadella will start focusing his time more on Microsoft's core technology. It is a big announcement, and so I want to bring on our Microsoft reporter, Aaron Holmes, to tell us more about what he thinks of all this. Aaron, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you.
Happy to be here.
So we got big news today. Gosh, I wasn't expecting this one. Why do you think Microsoft is making this move?
You know, it's really interesting. I think that what Satya Nadella said in his memo to staff this morning is that he wants to be laser focused on leading, some of the engineering tasks that Microsoft has in front of it, like, developing cutting edge AI, as he put it, or, working on systems architecture and data centers, and is somewhat, delegating more of the sales and go to market role to Judson Althoff. At the same time, it's hard to judge exactly how big of a change this is just because Satya is still, above Judson in the org chart and is effectively still the CEO overseeing everything. So I think we're going to have to wait and see whether this actually, meaningfully changes his role in that regard.
And we should say, Microsoft has a ton of CEOs inside the org, right?
Yeah, this is a company that is kind of known for, for role inflation. It has probably like dozens of executive vice presidents and over 100 corporate vice presidents, not to mention several CEOs, including, Mustafa Suleyman, who's the CEO of AI. So it's not uncommon for people to have these, really lofty titles at the company while still being somewhat lower on the org chart.
Right. Well, look, I want to talk about this role that Satya Nadella will now play. I think to understand what sorts of elements of the business he's now going to oversee a little more closely, I kind of want to take stock of where Microsoft's core technology is and how it stacks up against other big cloud players like Google, like AWS, Meta is getting in the game. Talk to us about where their models sit right now, because I think we think of it as synonymous with OpenAI, and yet they're obviously developing their own stuff too.
Yeah, so we've seen Microsoft attempt to develop its own AI models over the past 2+ years. And so far, the progress on that has been somewhat halting. They finally just debuted their AI models for the first time last month, but they still haven't done a full release of those models. And, they early on stacked up a bit lower than the models from OpenAI and Google. So I think, the company is still somewhat playing catch up there. And at the same time, their efforts to develop their own chips, as we reported, a couple months ago, had to be scaled back because they were behind schedule. So I think there are a few realms where, Nadella might really want to put his head down and work on catching up and getting Microsoft back into, the top 5 or first place on those fields.
So we've got chips, we've got models, any sort of signal from them as to how much he's going to be focused on data centers and, quantum as well?
Yeah, the company has put out a lot of research about quantum computing in recent years and signaled that it's important, but it's still, not clear when that will become something that's actually like usable as part of its, its systems. At the same time, it is, spending as much as many of the other hyperscalers on data centers. The company spent more than $80 billion last year and is on track to spend even more than that in the coming year on CapEx. And Satya said in his memo today that he essentially wants to focus on the highest ambition technical work, like those data centers, as part of his role. So I think we'll see, him get even more hands-on in that realm.
Right. Great. Well, Aaron, I take it this is just the start of what we have to find out about the new ways that Microsoft plans to operate. And so I look forward to having you on again. That was Aaron Holmes, our Microsoft reporter here at The Information. Okay. Well, yesterday was our AI Agenda Live conference in New York. We had a number of great speakers, including Sarah Guo from Conviction and other speakers from Reflection AI, Weka, and 1X. I want to bring on our AI reporter, Stephanie Palazzolo, who hosted the event to share more about her big takeaways from the discussions yesterday. Stephanie, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So, look, I want to talk all about what your biggest key takeaways were. But before we do it, I do want to play a clip. We've got a clip from Sarah Guo at Conviction. Let's take a look.
I think most tools take a cycle of adoption that is a lot longer than a few years. We've spent a bunch of time recently with really large private equity firms that are figuring out how to transform the companies they own. And they're like, okay, we have a 5-year plan that involves education, adoption of tools, training, reskilling, performance management. And I think that is more of the timeline that people should expect of just, real human beings who are used to doing something for a long time are going to need to figure out how to use these tools. And that is a lot of education.
So this idea here of a 5-year timeline, I mean, I thought it was a good point that Sarah made. It's also a long time to, sort of wait for a return on your investment in some cases. What were your big key takeaways from that discussion? And then we'll get into later parts of the conference in a second.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so Sarah was responding to a question that I'd asked her around kind of this disconnect that we've written a lot about in the world of AI, where on one hand, you have companies that are obviously investing, tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars into this infrastructure, data centers. And then we have people like Sam Altman who are saying, AI will soon be able to cure cancer and fix our education system. But then on the other hand, we've also written a lot about businesses that are just having a lot of trouble getting AI up and running in a reliable way, or finding useful use cases for it with products like Agentforce from Salesforce or Copilot from Microsoft. And so I think Sarah's point here is that these things are never as easy as what people think. And the timeline that we should expect to kind of see some of these products start working in a reliable way is more on more in the scope of, 5+ years versus a couple months.
Right. And I should say, two of the other points that I thought were really interesting is we also had speakers from SAP and from AMD on the stage yesterday. And some of the points that they raised, which resonated with me, are this idea that, hey, a lot of companies are spending on pilot projects right now, and they might not be seeing the ROI initially from these pilot projects, but you just kind of got to stick with it. And, just because a pilot doesn't go well doesn't mean you stop investing. It's actually more reason to keep finding the thing that can make you a lot of money. And the other point that they raised was that it's really the boring use cases of AI that are being most practical, or the most practical uses right now for the technology. It's not the stuff in the promo videos. It's like, reading through documents quicker and, PDFs and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's definitely very true with the customers that we talk to. And I think maybe what the issue is just how big that disconnect is between, again, the very high expectations and the promises of AI and what they're able to do in real life, which a lot of the times is just, searching through PDF or taking an image and
Right.
taking that text to put into an expense report. So I think the fact that it's taking a while is not a surprise, but just, reality versus expectations, that gap, I think, is just quite large.
What about the panel you had at the end of the day? You had some folks on from Databricks and from Anthropic. You were talking about sort of the core technology, right? I mean, reinforcement learning, AGI. What were some of the reflections you had from that? Because they didn't necessarily agree on some of the points that they were both talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a fascinating panel. So I think part of what I wanted to get from both of them is a bit of a kind of vibe check of sorts on the, AI research world. Because again, last year there had been a lot of stories, kicked off by one that we wrote in November, around, the issues the labs were running into whenever they just simply tried to train models on more compute and more data. They weren't getting the improvements that they had expected. And so, interestingly, I think yesterday was a bit of a shift from that with people like Sholto Douglas from Anthropic showing some kind of cautious optimism there.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of made the comment where he said, I really think we can get to AGI or like AI that's on the level of human experts in certain domains, just by using techniques that we already have today and we understand largely how to use, like reinforcement learning. And so that's obviously a pretty striking point just because AGI is kind of, it's like the pie in the sky and the gold is
Right. It's like, what is AG? Like this is the thing that Microsoft and OpenAI are debating right now. It's like, like
yeah.
we're never going to know when we get there, really.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very hard to define, and it kind of feels like the goalposts keep on moving a little bit. But I mean, I think it was surprising and promising that he was so optimistic on our chances of reaching AGI, however you want to define it,
Mhm,
by
mhm.
without needing new types of models or brand new kind of scientific discoveries.
Right. Well, Stephanie, it was a great event yesterday. There was so much more, including topics about robotics and also some of the more scientific applications of AI that I'm excited to bring to our audience later on throughout the week. And we'll be sure to have you on more to talk more about it. That is Stephanie Palazzolo, our AI reporter and host of yesterday's AI Agenda Live conference here in New York City. Okay. Well, speaking of Anthropic wasn't the only company to launch a new model this week. DeepSeek also released a new model, which it is calling experimental right now. But given the way that DeepSeek has a track record of moving markets around the world, everyone in AI pays close attention to every update that they put out. I want to bring on Nick Patience, VP and practice lead of AI at the Futurum Group, to talk to us about how he is thinking about this new model release. Nick, welcome to TITV. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Akash. Thanks for having me.
So, talk to us about what exactly this new model is, because I get kind of confused. You've got the decimals in there, you've got the experimental nature of it. What exactly did they release this week?
So they released what they call DeepSeek version 3.2 experimental. So given as you kind of hinted, the word experimental is in there and the 3.2. This is based on the version 3 of the model they released earlier this year, but it's not version 4. So this is very much and they made no bones about it. This is an experiment. And so the key innovation that they talked about was what they call DeepSeek sparse attention. So it kind of makes the model more efficient. While and more cost effective to use
Right.
without a noticeable drop in performance. And so this is obviously a big deal because as we were just talking about, the costs of running large AI models can be cost prohibitive. And so anything that can do it can be done to make models more efficient
Right.
would make them more useful.
And so when we hear sparse attention, basically we are just to think that, hey, we use less compute and it's cheaper. Is that the idea?
Yeah, and that's exactly the idea. And as a kind of whether there was a correlation causation here thing, they also announced at the same time they'd cut their API prices in half.
Oh,
So they're implying.
so they're going for the price leader in every respect here.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess they were implying that because they've got a more efficient model, they can charge less for it and make it up on volume
Right.
of API calls, I guess.
And
I mean, it's always hard to know exactly, but that's the implication.
And remind us, we've heard that several models are good for several specific tools and applications, I guess. This model, is there any sort of consensus on, is it good for coding, for, text generation? Where does it sort of specialize? Is it a broad model?
It's fairly broad. I mean, the one thing they didn't give a lot away, but the one thing they did talk about was long context windows. So you're talking there about document processing of large volumes of information, of text, essentially. That's what it's probably good at. They haven't really indicated that it's particularly good at code generation or anything like that. It's more it can input a large volume of information and then process that, do analysis on that
Right.
kind of application.
Right. And from the people you talk to, I mean, how good is it?
Well, it's hard to get much details yet on how good it is. I mean, because it's extremely early, but early indications is it's pretty good. There's difficult to I'm slightly skeptical of the kind of benchmark race because I'm not sure some of these things have real world use cases. So it's not it's not obviously being used in a real world use case at the moment. So it's
Right.
it's very hard to determine.
Right. I mean, you follow so many of these different models that are being released and the different companies that are behind it. I kind of want to take a little bit of your pulse on the models coming out of China right now, because a lot was made of DeepSeek when it first came out and sort of shocked the world. I mean, since then, we've seen a lot of other companies in China, not the least of which are ByteDance and Alibaba, also making progress with their own models. Give us a little bit of the lay of the land in terms of how DeepSeek's technology now stacks up against some of those other big companies in China that are releasing their own tools.
I think it does stack up pretty well. I mean, with Alibaba, as you say, and the others. I think it's China is appearing to take a fairly pragmatic attitude towards this. This is not a kind of march towards AGI, a quest for AGI. This does seem to be more focused on practical applications in business and in academic research and things like that, rather than big flashy announcements and and kind of great statements that we're just one model improvement away from AGI. So I think they have a kind of fundamental different attitude to Western Europe and US, certainly model makers, and also embracing open source and doing releasing a lot of not just DeepSeek but other Chinese vendors releasing a lot of things open source, which is something. A lot of the, you have some elements of it with Mistral and Cohere, and then obviously more recently OpenAI realized they had to go and do that as well.
Are those other the companies I mentioned in China, for example, are they catching up to DeepSeek in terms of compute efficiency? Not being able to have to use as much. Where are we there?
I'm slightly skeptical about the claims that DeepSeek made in the first place back in January. Because obviously they were basically implying, and they said so in a paper and a paper then and a later paper, that they actually done most of the work in advance, like 90% of the work, and then basically spent a few $100,000 on the last sort of 5% of training. Right. So there's multiple training runs that went on before that. So I don't quite buy the notion that they are so super efficient and everything is just costs six figures versus millions. I just don't really think that's the case. So I think they've done an incredibly good job of pitching that. And but there's obviously some elements of it that they are good as anybody else at efficient model making. It depends, but there's a whole load of other things around. Models are not applications.
Right.
Models are not platforms. They're not things. They're things you can use within a and then get a development environment and bring them in and things like that. So it's kind of I think they stack up pretty well against their Chinese counterparts. Which is not bad considering where they came from, spun out of a hedge fund.
Right.
But there's a lot more going on there, I think, under the hood than they sometimes make out, and they haven't really released a lot of detail on this one.
And so taken together with all this into consideration, then the question I have for you is sort of what you see the long-term future of DeepSeek specifically being. You talked about now how the other companies are coming into the picture. You talked about how there have been sort of some clarifications about, how the model was actually developed. Is DeepSeek sort of a flash in the pan in the long run of AI, or do you see it as sort of an enduring business and an enduring technology that actually gets adopted, very widely around the world?
I think they're getting adopted pretty widely in China, and even especially in the large EV market there. There's a whole nother discussion about how many EV vendors you need in one market, but they're very widely adopted there. I'm slightly skeptical about a long-term future, I'll be honest, of them, because I say it does all seem to be focused on the model itself. And I think OpenAI has realized early on, and the others are realizing early on, there is more to life than models. And, for instance, if you're a CIO of a large bank at the moment, are you focused on DeepSeek's experimental model, or are you focused more on the challenges of getting your AI applications into production? I suspect it's the latter. And so I think the companies that will succeed in this market are the ones that build out more of a stack.
Maybe that makes them a good acquisition candidate in that case.
Yes, possibly. Yeah, exactly. They're obviously good at that, what they do. And, in the model-centric nature of what they do, they're good at it. There's no two ways about it, and they're obviously attracting good researchers, and that's another battle that goes on in the AI world.
Right.
And so, you're right. I think they probably are a good target if that's what the owners want to do, of course.
Right. Well, Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know that these models are coming fast and furious. We didn't even get to talk about Anthropic's new model this week, but we'll have to have you back on next time we get a new big release. That was Nick Patience from the Futurum Group. Okay. Well, earlier this week, we had an executive from Snowflake on the show talking about their answer to the corporate data wars that are shaking out in AI. And Snowflake is not the only software company that has been outspoken on that issue. I want to bring on Zeb Evans, the CEO of ClickUp, to give us some of his thoughts. ClickUp is a project management and product development software company that was last valued at $4 billion. Zeb, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
It's a great shirt you're wearing, man. Holy moly.
I always have crazy shirts. Unfortunately, I branded myself as this. So if I don't wear something crazy, then everybody's like, what's wrong, Zeb?
Well, it's funny. The instruction I get from our team is they say, wear the quietest shirts as possible. So maybe I'll have to tell them now. I say, look at what Zeb was wearing. I mean, he looks, he's having fun out there. Anyway, let's talk about the fun of corporate data wars, because it's something that we've written about a lot of the information. Very quickly, just in 20 seconds, tell us about what your business does and the software that you sell and sort of your relationship to this issue at hand.
Yeah, so ClickUp builds what we call converged software, which is single application platform primitives where you can build pretty much any software on top of our platform. And so we see the future as you purchasing software and AI from one vendor. And we see this as like super software providers that occur in the future. And that is what we are building towards today.
Got it. And so tell me, how big of an issue has the corporate data wars and AI been for you? I mean, have you had trouble accessing data, as you try to build out AI tools and stuff like that?
We have, so with two examples would be Slack and with Figma.
Right.
Both of those have started locking down data access depending on which scope you have with their APIs. And the big thing here is that I think most customers and most people don't understand how important that context is yet, because the B2B value has yet to be realized in AI and in the vast majority of companies and the vast majority of use cases, outside of engineering, let's say, and copywriting. And those things will become so much more valuable over time. And that's, again, why we see the world as converged software. You have 100% context, and you'll need 100% context for AI to actually do its best job.
Have you gone about quantifying this issue at all in terms of like, hey, like this has costed us this much revenue? We could have grown our user base, I don't know, 10 percentage points faster if we had this. Have you put any numbers around it?
The value and the loss of value is more for the customer. Right? It's really in certain companies for sure, when their business model is based off this, they're hurt. Like Glean, for example, right? That's something that we predicted would happen. Is that these other companies, first of all, enterprise search would become a feature on everybody else's platform. I think that's what will happen with nearly all software that is built in the next year or 2 years. I mean, if you believe that engineering, what efficiency will gain in productivity, you have to believe that every company will build more software, not less software. So it's really the customer that gets screwed in these situations, not the company, unless that company is one of those providers of that actual enterprise search tool.
Right. And I guess that's what I was getting at. Presumably the companies that sell enterprise search tools or your company that sells, you guys sell these types of AI tools as well?
We do. But in this case, we've actually just seen a surge in customers adopting our chat product because of this. Our chat product is free, and it is the same feature parity as something like Slack or Microsoft Teams. So in many of these cases where their data access was cut off and that customer was already realizing value from AI having access to their team communication, a big portion of them would just switch to ClickUp, and then it gives them 100% context, and there is no worry about, are they going to cut off data again? How much access are they going to allow? So we've actually seen it as a benefit for our platform.
So I'm sure you followed the news of Snowflake and the consortium that they put together earlier this week with a bunch of companies signing on to say, hey, we need open data access. That is the future of this sector. Was that sort of the step that you were looking to take? I mean, we had Snowflake on the show. He sort of made clear it's a bit of a handshake agreement, but the idea is everyone abides by it. Was that the solution that you were looking for? Are you just looking for everyone to join that pledge? Like, what is the solution here?
I believe that the only thing that is realistic that will happen when you think about business perspectives and interests is that over time you will have super software providers. You will have several software providers that provide all software and all AI for companies. So you only go to one. So we
So
can.
you're saying we're going to get even it's
Yeah.
going to be consolidation even more.
Yep. 100%, 100%. And so I think everybody can sit there and say those things.
So are you
but
are you saying that like I just want to make sure I understand. So you're looking at a company like Salesforce, the owner of Slack, right? We've written about, and as you said, right, they've put up some of these walls for data access. You're saying that a company like Salesforce is going to get even bigger and sort of engulf all of the tools in one?
They're going to put up more walls, and over time, yes, and they will attempt to provide all of your software
Okay.
for your business. And I think that's where that's the future of software in B2B.
Okay. So I'm just so what is the future of the startups then?
Yeah, look, I have a 40-page memo on this. I'm happy to share, but I think it's very difficult for startups. I don't think you can
Startups
really,
like yourself.
I think I think early stage startups, it is going to be impossible to create a public company in B2B software in the future. But I think that there are some platforms that have built large enough already and have the scale to be able to go public and to be able to compete against the giants, and that can provide all of that software with last mover advantage. Not just bundling every single software product under the planet and it not actually talking well together and not actually connecting together and having totally different user experiences. I think that there is room for new entrants, but ultimately, yeah, all software will converge. I think software will converge with AI, and the AI labs themselves will start building into productivity software also.
So I maybe I'm just not following the point. I just want to make sure I get it here because I read your op-ed, and you talked about how these data walls are sort of a limitation for up and coming startups, right? And so I read that, and now I'm hearing you say that the big companies are really they're gonna put up these walls. It's gonna be inevitable. They're gonna get bigger. And so I'm sort of trying to understand where you stand on the issue then, because it sounds like you're saying, hey, the walls are going to happen, the big guys are going to win, and there's nothing we can do about it.
I think that I'm not saying only the big guys will win, but the big guys will be so threatened that they will put up more walls, and they will be threatened by new software that gets added to their category or to similar categories around them. They will build that themselves. They will try to provide that themselves and keep their walls up. And so trying to sell all software to their customers, and there will be new entrants to be clear, and I consider us one of those in this horizontal software world of flexibility where you can build vertical software on horizontal software platforms. I think there will be some new entrants there for sure, but yeah, it will be very difficult.
Okay. Last question before I let you go. You are planning to go public. What's the timeline for that?
Hopefully, and we don't have a date yet. I'm happy to get back to you as soon as we know it. But
is it 2025? Is it this year?
Most likely not this year. Probably
next year. Next year. Okay. Well, we'll have to have you back on because I am very interested in your perspective on this. Thank you so much for coming on the show. That is the CEO of ClickUp. It is his first time here on TITV.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Okay, well, for our final segment today, as details start to get clearer about what TikTok's U.S. business structure will look like, one big question that still remains is who actually is going to run the new entity. One possible candidate is a leader at the company named Adam Presser, and to tell us more about why that could make sense, I want to bring on our D.C. correspondent, Sylvia Varnum O'Regan. Sylvia, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you.
Hi, Akash. Great to see you as always.
Okay, let's talk about Mr. Presser. Why should we be paying attention to Mr. Presser? Adam Presser. I don't know why. We've had a long week already. Let's talk about Adam.
Sure. So Adam Presser is a very senior executive at TikTok. He's in fact one of the most high-ranking Americans at the company, and he's very closely aligned with the current CEO of TikTok. He also has quite an interesting background. He studied Chinese languages and literature at Yale. He went to law school and got an MBA from Harvard. And he also spent many years working in China for various companies and working in the entertainment industry in particular. Now, he started at TikTok in 2022 as chief of staff to the CEO. And since then, he's really risen through the ranks. And we've covered this at The Information. He's been involved in a lot of different teams, a lot of different critical decisions. And recently, in the past couple of months, he was actually promoted to lead a unit called USDS, which is looking to be quite central to this deal, or what we know of this deal, which of course is still very much in motion and not yet finalized from our understanding.
So I do want to talk about this group USDS because it feels like for the length that we've been covering this TikTok saga, I mean, we heard about, Project Texas was one sort of iteration of TikTok's effort to sort of separate some of its operations from the U.S. Is that related to USDS, or how should we think about what USDS is?
Right. It's a really good question. So, as we know, national security concerns have been central to a lot of different government moves over the years with regards to TikTok in the US. And back in 2022, TikTok created USDS, this separate unit, within the company to address some of those concerns. And it was part of what you mentioned, Project Texas. And this was a proposal to address those concerns from the government around the security of US users' data. Project Texas wasn't fully implemented, I should say, and the government didn't accept it as a solution. However, TikTok did create USDS, and the purpose of it was, as I said, to safeguard the user data of Americans on the platform. And from what we understand, and again, there's so much that we're still trying to learn about this deal now in the present day, which is involving selling TikTok's US operations to a group of investors. But from what we understand about what is actually going to be handed over in this deal, it's looking like USDS could be central to that because remember, the deal is really focused on data, user data,
Right.
and on American users' data in particular.
Right. But we should say, I mean, there's still sort of some questions around advertising revenue, for example, who does that go to? Who earns that? Does that go back to the China entity, the US entity? I mean, so I think this idea of it being, USDS possibly as the thing that becomes TikTok US is a good point. I do want to talk about, whoever comes into this role as CEO of TikTok US. This is like a huge mountain to climb for the person, right? I mean, you have to sort of maintain the customer base that has really driven so much traffic on the platform, and yet you have to do it without a lot of the resources conceivably that you initially had in China. How do you think about the challenges that this person will have to overcome in the role as CEO, whether it's Adam Presser or someone else?
Right. I think it will be a really tough job because this person will be overseeing a really complicated transition, some type of separation of the US business. Now, that could be a big or small separation from TikTok's Chinese parent company, ByteDance. We don't really know. And it could be the case that, in fact, things stay somewhat similar, right? But regardless, there is going to be this licensing of the algorithm, and there is going to be some kind of separation insofar as the new joint venture company that will own the American TikTok will have its own board. So the CEO will be interacting with that board. And of course, the investors involved in this deal that we know of are a real kind of mixed bag, but a lot of them are billionaires, or there are billionaires at the head of these companies who are aligned with Trump. The White House has taken a very active role in this deal. So I think there's a question about how much is the White House or President Trump going to seek to be involved in the operations. Right. And there's also this big question of how much ByteDance, the Chinese parent company of TikTok, will be involved also, because to date, TikTok is very reliant on ByteDance. The companies are very connected, and TikTok draws on a lot of engineering talent from ByteDance. So separating these companies will not be easy, and sort of overseeing a group of employees through this transition after many years of tumult as it is could be quite a challenge.
Right. Well, Sylvia, I suspect that this story, as I tell you every time, it's like it's only Wednesday. Okay, so let's wait till the end of the week. We'll probably have more updates to talk with you about by then. Thank you, Sylvia, for coming on. As always, that is Sylvia Varnum O'Regan, our DC correspondent here at The Information. Well, that does it for today's show. A reminder that our show airs Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. You can find us on this stream. I want to thank Amazon Web Services, who is our presenting sponsor for this production. And I want to thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate your viewership. I am already excited for our next show tomorrow. And so until then, bye-bye for now.